You want to get dangerously good at poker. Not lucky, not streaky, good. The kind of good that makes other players uncomfortable when you sit down. The kind of good that turns silence at the table into pressure. And I'm going to tell you something nobody at those shiny casinos will ever admit. You don't lose because you're stupid. You lose because the game is designed to punish people who think poker is about cards. It isn't. It's about habits, patterns, weakness, and the worst one belongs to you. You play hands because you're bored. You chase because the pot feels too big to fold. You convince yourself the turn card owes you something. You bleed chips the way a cracked pipe leaks water, quietly, constantly, until there's nothing left and you swear you were almost there. You weren't. You were predictable, and predictable players are walking ATMs. You want the first real slap of truth? You become dangerous the moment you stop playing hands you want to play and start playing hands other people hate to face. Tight isn't boring. Tight is a knife. Controlled aggression isn't flashy. It's a quiet storm. You're not supposed to look comfortable. You're supposed to look inevitable. If you're still here, you're not a tourist. You're someone who's felt that sick heat in your chest after a bad call, that slow, metallic taste in your mouth when you shove and instantly regret it. If you want to be part of the handful of players who stops feeding the machine, stay. Join the resistance. Hit subscribe and stick around with the rest of us who are tired of donating rent money to billion-dollar carpets. I worked behind those tables. I watched players like you from the other side. I saw the pit bosses smirk when a new guy sat down with shaky hands and a fresh buy-in. I counted chips poured into trays by people who thought they were just one hand away. I learned every pattern the casino loves because my job was to watch it unfold. And when I finally walked away, it wasn't because I grew a conscience. It was because I got tired of seeing the same mistakes ruin the same people over and over. So answer me something. When you've got a weak pair and the pot is already swollen, does your brain whisper, maybe the river saves me? Do you feel your pulse spike when you tell yourself you're already too deep to fold? Tell me I'm not the only one who's seen that voice ruin a perfectly good stack. Drop it in the comments. I read them. I want to know how your worst hand felt. Here's where we start carving the bad habits out of you. The first truth, position is gravity. When you act last, you control the hand. When you act early, you're basically playing poker blindfolded with your shoelaces tied together. Yet most players treat position like furniture, background noise. I watched guys limp into pots from under the gun with garbage like offsuit Queen 9 because they were feeling it. That's not confidence, that's self-sabotage with a smile. You become dangerous when you treat early position like a minefield. Raise only when your hand is strong enough to carry the burden of acting first. Fold hands that feel cute. Cute hands kill bankrolls. You wait. You let the impatient players reveal themselves. And late position, you widen your range, but you don't get sloppy. You apply pressure like sandpaper, not a sledgehammer. Second truth, your bet size tells a story. Most amateurs bet like they're leaving breadcrumbs. Tiny, nervous, indecisive chips. They think small pot means small risk. No, small pots mean death by mosquito bites. You need purpose. When you bet, you're announcing something. Strength, denial, or a trap. Casinos love players who bet the same amount with every hand because it makes you readable, and readable means profitable. You use consistent sizing with strong ranges, then you mix enough aggression to make people uncomfortable calling you light. A good player doesn't scare you by shouting. They scare you the way a quiet room does right before a storm. When your bets finally get called, it's because someone earned that pain. Third truth, stop worshipping draws. You know that moment. You've got a flush draw, 2 cards short, and the pot is fat and warm like a pie on a windowsill. You convince yourself it's yours already. You chase like a kid sprinting up an icy slide in socks, and you slide back down every single time. Draws aren't promises, they're bait, and casinos love players who bite. You become dangerous when you treat draws as leverage, not destiny. If the price is wrong, you fold. No drama, no ego. When the price is right, you don't just call, you turn that draw into a weapon. Semi-bluff. Force your opponent to pay admission to see the next card. Make them uncomfortable. Make them the ones staring at the felt wondering if they just stepped into something bigger than they realized. Fourth truth, your biggest leaks happen after you lose a pot. I've seen grown men turn into storm clouds after one bad beat. They start calling hands they would have folded 10 minutes ago, like they're trying to get revenge on the deck. You tilt, you chase ghosts, you start playing poker with your nerves instead of your brain. You want to know how predators are made? They feed on tilt. They wait for you to snap. The moment you push chips out of frustration, you're not a player anymore, you're dinner. There's a simple rule I used to whisper to the dealers as a joke. The most expensive hand at the table is the one you play right after you're angry. And here's where things get uncomfortable, because the next secret isn't about strategy, it's about the one instinct every losing player carries like a ticking bomb under the table, and once you see it, you won't unsee it. You know that instinct I was talking about, the one that creeps in when you've already put chips in the pot, the whisper that says you've come this far, you can't fold now. That instinct has a name behind the scenes. We used to call it the sunk cost disease, and casinos live off of it like oxygen. You don't protect your stack, you protect your ego. You don't want to admit you were wrong pre-flop, so you keep paying rent on a losing hand like you're emotionally attached to it. I've seen players call 3 streets with middle pair just because they didn't want to waste what they'd already put in. That isn't courage, that's denial with a chip count. Here's the rule nobody likes hearing. Every decision in poker is new. The money you already put in is gone, dead, funeral over. You're making a fresh decision with every card. If you keep clinging to old chips like a bad memory, you're the easiest target at the table. You become dangerous when you teach yourself to fold late in a hand without shame. Imagine cutting a rope before it drags you off a cliff. That's what a good fold is. Quiet survival. Most players don't have the stomach for it. You will. Now we talk about the thing everyone pretends they understand, but almost nobody actually does. Ranges. People love to say, I put him on ace-king. No, you didn't. You guessed. You made up a story that felt good. Real players don't guess a single hand. They weigh a cluster of possibilities like scales on a counter. When someone raises from early position, their range is heavy, strong pairs, high cards. When a loose player raises from the button, their range is a bag of mismatched screws. You don't react to one fantasy hand in your head. You react to the set of hands that make sense for how they play, where they sit, and how they've behaved all night. And here's where you sharpen the blade. You don't just watch what they bet, you watch how they arrived there. Do they only bet big when they're comfortable? Do they freeze when the board pairs? Do they speed up after winning a pot, like a drunk pressing the gas after getting away with a yellow light? Every pattern is a confession if you're patient enough to let it talk. Then there's the trap that separates gamblers from predators, overvaluing one-pair hands. You hit top pair and suddenly you treat it like a family heirloom. You cradle it, you defend it, you bleed for it. Meanwhile, the board is screaming danger, straight draws, flush draws, paired cards, and you're still convincing yourself your single pair is some kind of royal decree. Here's the truth nobody wants to swallow. One pair is a lottery ticket with lipstick. It looks good, it feels important, it collapses under pressure. A dangerous player learns to downgrade their hand when the board grows teeth. When the texture shifts, your job isn't to pray, your job is to reassess, like a surgeon deciding whether to keep operating or walk away. Let's talk about aggression, because this is where most of you wobble. You think aggression means blasting every pot with bravado. That's not aggression, that's noise. Real aggression is disciplined cruelty. You attack weakness, not randomness. You pick the spots where your story makes sense. If you've raised pre-flop and the board favors your range, you continue with confidence. If the board hits their calling range harder than yours, you slow down. You don't slam on the gas just because you're emotionally invested. You apply pressure when your line is believable, not because you're trying to scare the universe into helping you. And then we reach the ugliest truth of all. Your table image is a mirror you don't control. You might think you're playing solid, but if you've shown 2 loose calls in the last 20 minutes, congratulations, you're the clown with the balloon knife. Good players will lean into you until you snap, so you weaponize reputation instead of fighting it. If you've looked tight for an hour, your bluffs buy credibility. If you've looked splashy, your value bets get paid like overdue invoices. You don't fight the way people perceive you. You ride it like a wave and steer it into profit. The casino doesn't care about any of this. They don't need to. Poker rakes itself. The room makes its money by letting you implode slowly, not with one big mistake, but with 100 small leaks that feel harmless in the moment. Tiny calls, emotional bets, ego battles with strangers you'll never see again. I watched regulars who thought they were sharks. They strutted in, loud, confident, convinced the room feared them, but their patterns shone like neon signs. Bet strong only when strong. Check when scared. Call down weak because pride wouldn't let them fold. They weren't predators, they were routines. And you're here because you don't want to become one of them. So here's the final piece that turns you from prey into problem. You build a rulebook for yourself and you actually follow it when your pulse goes ugly. A rule for tilt, a rule for folding late, a rule for walking away when your brain turns into wet cement. You don't chase losses because you missed a draw. You don't play short stacked out of spite. You don't talk yourself into marginal hands just because the dealer keeps feeding you impatience and neat little rectangles. You treat your bankroll like oxygen, not fuel. Oxygen. When your stock shrinks, your ego doesn't get to touch the wheel. You protect what's left and you wait for the moment where patience turns into pressure. You don't force the game to pay you. You corner it until it doesn't have a polite way out. That's where danger lives. Casinos hate players who move like that. Quiet, calculated, detached. The ones who fold without hesitation, then strike like they've been sharpening something under the table all night. I've seen floors notice them. I've seen dealers get nervous because the rhythm of the table shifts. The room feeds on emotion, and when you refuse to give it any, everything goes cold. And that's your edge. Not luck, not superstition, not some fantasy system you found scribbled on a forum at 3 in the morning. Your edge is discipline sharpened into a blade. If you walked into a poker room tomorrow with half of what you've heard here burned into your spine, you'd scare more players than any loudmouth with sunglasses and a hoodie, because you wouldn't be chasing pots anymore. You'd be hunting mistakes, yours first, then theirs. And if you ever forget any of this, if you feel that old heat rising in your chest, that stubborn voice telling you the next hand fixes everything, do yourself a favor. Stand up, walk away. The table will still be there, but you won't be the same person sitting down again.